I'll let you know when that has happened.
Mommy, what's this? Mommy, what's this? Mommy, what?
All right. Good evening. Olive wants to say hi to you before she goes to bed, y'all.
Hello. Hello. You're adorable. Hello.
Can you say hi? Tell everybody good night.
Oh no.
Okay. Head back downstairs.
We have all been there.
Yeah, that, you know what? It's Bishop Smith is very used to this. This has been yeah. So but welcome. We are so grateful to have you this evening and grateful that you have joined us for this conversation here in the North Carolina Synod, and grateful that God is moving in our synod in such a way that we're having conversations about reconciliation and equity and justice. And I have to tell you today as we get started that I have been a part of lots of conversations with Bishop Smith in this. But Pastor Jay, your book is one that has gotten Bishop Smith really, really excited. And I am thrilled. I am thrilled that we can offer this across our synod and even in places like New Jersey and Florida as we gather together via Zoom. Just a couple of announcements as we get started. The first is whether you're on Facebook or you're joining us on Zoom, you have an opportunity to engage in the chat. On Zoom, we will use the Q&A feature to ask panelists questions at the end if you have a particular question for Bishop Smith or for Pastor Jay. Additionally, we want you to know that we've got follow-up conversations. We have 2 sessions that'll be facilitated with Bishop Smith, and then Pastor Jay has been gracious enough to say, I'm coming back for our 3rd session once we've read the book, right? So today's just the primer. We don't know anything yet, but when we come back in the 3rd session, I will have the opportunity to engage again.
That'd be the 4th session?
The 4th session, yeah, bad at math.
Yeah.
4th session, so we'll look forward to that. The other thing that we want to let you know is that the book is in pre-order right now. And so you've seen in the announcements about the book study that the goal, the goal is to get you to pre-order the book. It comes out February 8th. And if you pre-order, that means it'll be on your doorstep February 8th. So we want to get that into your hands as soon as possible. And I have heard multiple times from friends who've written books that pre-orders are like Miracle Grow in the publishing world, that they help acknowledge and honor this work. So even if you're like, I'm not going to be able to read it in February, pre-order the book. That's okay. We can read it together in March and continue this work and conversation. But again, we're so grateful that you're with us. Just as we get started, our practice in the Synod since November in any event or gathering has been to start with a land acknowledgement. As we think about reconciliation and justice, this is part of our work alongside and in honor and solidarity with our Indigenous siblings. So I'm going to invite Carissa Abraham, who is new in a role as a program associate serving in the area of social justice, to lead us in our land acknowledgement.
Yes, so we are gathered together in this virtual place from all over, connected by technology, by faith, a common sense of purpose, the breath that's given us by the breath maker who is named and called us here, and the very piece of Mother Earth, the land that each of us inhabits today. We understand the importance and necessity of acknowledging the land, as well as the original Indigenous peoples whose creation stories are rooted in these places and who have lived on these lands since time immemorial. We also understand that all land is Indigenous land. So we invite each of you to name in the chat the Indigenous peoples or tribal nations who were the first to love, pray, grow, celebrate, cry, drum, and sing upon the lands and places where you are now located. And while you're doing that, I'll share that the North Carolina Synod Office is located on the original and ancestral homelands of the Kiowa people. And the land where I'm joining from tonight is located on the lands of the Sugary, the Kiowa, and the Catawba people. So thank you for sharing. We also know that Indigenous peoples are not historical subjects, but are part of our communities today, our churches, schools, and leadership, and that they offer invaluable wisdom for the ways that we exist today and in the future in relationship with Mother Earth and our human and non-human neighbors. If you are Indigenous, we invite you to name your people or tribe in the chat feature now so that we can see you more fully in this virtual space. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for sharing and for acknowledging the land. We understand the importance and necessity of acknowledging the land and its original Indigenous peoples, and doing so consistently whenever and wherever we might gather together. We understand that this protocol is only the first step, and that as we venture into the world, we must learn more, do more, and realize healing and justice for the Indigenous peoples whose land we now occupy. So let us begin this work for healing and justice by entering into a place of peace and prayer together.
Bishop Smith, as we begin, I want to invite you to start us in prayer.
Let's pray. Gracious God, you create us in and through and for relationships. We confess to you our brokenness, our self-centeredness that sets us apart, separates us from you and from one another. Some of it individual acts, but much of it now over many, many centuries and passing on down from one generation to the next, just systemic ways that we have embedded our brokenness, our images of superiority, our privilege against those whom we have labeled other and therefore excluded or marginalized. Or even if we don't know that we've done that, we in fact have. So this word of reconciliation, which we begin to study in Pastor Augustine's book this evening, is a word of hope, but also a word of hard work and challenge for us to be about this ongoing and hard work. So help us to find the balance of that hopefulness and that commitment to do what we can do, even if they seem very small things, to make a difference for the sake of the unity that you share very clearly, that you desire for all of your people. Guide us this evening, we pray in the name of Christ. Amen.
Bishop Smith, and we're turning it over to you. So I'll invite you to invite Pastor Augustine to introduce himself to the Synod.
Yes, if I can just simply say that I didn't know Pastor Augustine a year ago right now. I actually met him in June 17th, I believe it was, to be exact, in a commemoration service in Durham that was hosted by St. Joseph AME congregation there, where he is pastor. I know he may say a little bit more about himself, but he's a fascinating man, a lawyer. He's from the New Orleans or from the Louisiana area for sure, which leads to some really wonderful and right up in front in the book analogies that I won't spoil for you just right now, but it's a great way to start. And also has just really, since I met him, been elected to or appointed to, I'm not sure exactly how that polity works, a position, a really important position of leadership in the AME church, and is just very serious about the work of reconciliation. And I don't mean to embarrass you, Pastor Augustine. His name is John, but he goes by Jay, J-A-Y. But I have read about 8 books just on the topic of racial reconciliation, one form or another, in the past 2 years, and I've needed to read more prior to that, and I still need to do a lot and to read more. But this is a book that really indeed has resonated with me on a personal level as well as a professional level, because for me at least, it finds a really, really hopeful way forward, not without hard work, but a hopeful way forward, while being at the same time deeply honest and deeply convicting and very specific, in outlining what many of our challenges are racially. And so it's a blessing to me on the commemoration of the Emmanuel 9 service last year with St. Paul's in Durham and Duke University, Divinity School, St. Joseph AME. I got to be there and be a participant in that and hear Dr. James Forbes' wonderful sermon on the parable of the sower. But I also got to know J. Augustine, who invited me to read his book and to do one of the kind of comments or endorser kind of things on it. So I read it some time ago, and then I just got done reading it again. And I picked up a lot I didn't read the first time. So I really do, if you can't read it in February, I hope you'll get the book and I hope you'll read it, because, and then the other thing, and I'll let Pastor Augustine say a few words of introduction that he would like to share about himself. But for me, so much of what we've done, even in the ELCA and the North Carolina Synod, with our commitment to even requiring racial sensitivity training, transforming white privilege was the name of the first module that we did, a day-long kind of a thing, required of all clergy. And many other workshops that I've been to, so much has been based on models of what Pastor Augustine would call civil reconciliation. Not without faith, they may have derived there, but it's not explicit within the civil reconciliation realm. But for me, as a minister of the gospel, Pastor Augustine takes it the way that I know how to preach even, or really to do anything. The scriptures. Let's do exegetical work and take us through the scriptures that lead us to the work of reconciliation and inclusion. And then a systematic, very systematic, building one on the other, theology of reconciliation. And then a historical period, and I was 62 last week, that really kind of goes through a primer of American politics in my lifetime, starting with the Richard Nixon years and the Southern strategy that show, and certainly I had never put all those pieces together the way that I saw it presented there. It gave me a really compelling case for why we are where we are now. So I truly appreciate it, Pastor Jay. And so let me hush and just say thank you so much for being here with us. But what would you like us to know about you before I ask you some questions and let you talk about what you want to talk about as well?
Well, first of all, the first thing I want you to know is I'm polite and I have manners enough to say thank you. And I am so appreciative for the warm way you have received me, for your welcoming gestures, for your kindness in reading the book, and obviously for the kind word of endorsement that you shared. I had the pleasure, obviously, as you indicated, of meeting you in person for the first time, June 17th of last year, as we were commemorating the assassination at Emmanuel AME Church down in Charleston. I appreciate your ownership, acknowledging that the assassin was a member of the ELCA, and acknowledging the lack of diversity in many regards, the lack of ethnic diversity that perhaps exists, ethnic or racial diversity that perhaps exists in the denomination, and your desire to do more to make it a more inclusive space. So I really appreciate your leadership in that regard. I have been very blessed in particular by at least two of your ministers. Danielle and I are working very closely together now in a group with the North Carolina Council of Churches, but historically, or for a few years now, I have been blessed through friendship with Scott Anderson and with Amanda Hyben. I think the absolute world of them, and they are doing wonderful work in Durham. Amanda with the Duke Lutherans and Scott obviously at St. Paul's, and I'm so grateful for their friendship too. I would say that the book is written in sort of a responsive format, and it was my response, my interdisciplinary response as someone who was a practicing lawyer for once upon a time, a civil rights attorney, as someone who went to seminary, who did doctoral work, who's been engaged in pastoral ministry, and who believes in social justice, who believes in the ethic of equality for all, and who believes that we are truly equal in the church, and the church should be an exemplar for society when we talk about a theology of equality. The book was written in response to the direction in which I saw America moving in the midst of the Obama administration and where we're still moving now. I think we're not moving there as quickly as we were. But I'm trying to dance around, because I don't want this to seem like a partisan comment, but I'm trying to dance around the 2016 election up to the 2020 election and the insurrection on January 6, 2021. In other words, I saw a very retrogressive America, an America moving back to her darker days rather than moving forward and appealing to her brighter angels. So the book speaks through the lens of the church's theology of reconciliation, in unpacking it in a threefold context. If you do a visual with the cross, and Martin King used to talk about that pretty often, the north, the up and down of the vertical axis represents our salvific relationship with God. We are saved in the Christian theological context. We are saved because of Jesus. When you think about the horizontal plane of the cross, or the horizontal axis, we are equal to one another because of Jesus. And then when you think about the theology of the ministers that led the civil rights movement, Paul's theology of equality says, in the church, there's no longer Jew or Greek, no longer free or slave, but we all, male or female, but we all are one in the name of Christ Jesus. Those ministers who went forward and literally spoke truth to institutions of power believed in what I call civil reconciliation, the third kind: salvific reconciliation, social reconciliation, and civil reconciliation. Says that if we really do hold these truths to be self-evident, that all people are created equal, then all means all, and all has got to be inclusive. I appreciate your comments regarding the connection that the book makes in secular terms, with the connection that it makes with the scriptures. I liken that all meaning all to the first Gentile coming into the church, to Cornelius coming into the church in the Acts 10 narrative, which is really meaningful when you unpack it and you look at Peter as a devout Jew. And Peter says, the vision comes to go eat the pork, and Peter's like, pork? Are you kidding me? I'm God. I'm a devout Jew, God. I can't eat that stuff. It's unclean. It's profane. And the Lord says, how can you declare profane or unclean that which I have made clean, right? The line for me that really is a catch-all in Acts 10:34, when Peter says, I now realize God is no respecter of persons, in the King James Version at least, meaning God doesn't make these distinctions. We as humans have made these distinctions. We've made them theologically, we've made them denominationally, we've made them ethnically, we've made them racially, but we really are all God's children. So the theology of reconciliation says that we all should be able to come together and respect and celebrate diversity in both its cognitive terms and its identity terms as we try to build a better world. And the church should be the exemplar for that.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll remind everybody that we'll save some time at the end for some of your questions. And Pastor Danielle and also Carissa, if you all would sort of keep up with that. And if we have tons of questions, we might get to the questions a little earlier than if we only have one, but I suspect we may have some questions or some clarification kind of things, because I have read the book now twice. Pastor Jay wrote the book, and I think you'd still be writing it if you could, but at some point you had to publish. Went back and did an epilogue, because you're like, oh, okay, now there's an insurrection. Oh, now there's, they're still happening in real time. So to make that response, but I suppose it goes without saying, although over and over again, I think it bites us individually and corporately when we think things go without saying that need to be said. You described 3 types of reconciliation, but what do you want us to hear when you say reconciliation? What does that mean? And let me tell you part of the behind the question, and you mentioned it in the book, particularly when it comes to indigenous peoples, persons of color, especially of African descent in this country. I have had people say to me, I don't believe reconciliation is what you mean, because that implies that we're going back to a time when it was good. And we don't have one of those in our relationship. So it's almost more like we got to create a new something. So can you speak a little bit about that?
Sure. So I lift up in the book that some would criticize the narrative of reconciliation because it asks, when have we ever had conciliatory relationships in the first place, right? And I absolutely understand that. As far as God is concerned, again, we are the ones that have created ethnic divisions. We are the ones who've created racial dynamics, dissensions. Race is a social construct. It is something that is wholly human-made. And not something I believe is recognized divinely. We see a sense of ethnic discrimination, ethnic oppression, and the like in the scriptures, going back to the Old Testament, obviously, when our Jewish brothers and sisters, the Israelites, are subject to enslavement. We've seen that narrative go through the New Testament, rather. In the gospel narratives, we see Jesus as a marginalized Jew, as an ethnically marginalized Jew. But the concept of reconciliation means that we recognize the sovereignty of God, and we come together through that social aspect, the horizontal plane that I made reference to, in understanding that Jesus came to reconcile us all to one another. We all are God's children. And the 2 Corinthians, one of the scriptural sites in the work, 2 Corinthians, speaks very much so to that, the ministry of reconciliation that Jesus left to the church. So the many divisions you lifted up, for example, the Southern strategy in your introductory comments. I deeply appreciate astute politicians. Who doesn't, right? And President Nixon and his advisors recognized that a pivot was necessary. The country was moving in a very progressive nature, or moving in one direction, I'll say, with King and the civil rights movement. And in the wake of that movement, there was a need to do a pivot. So his Southern strategy used race as a wedge issue, and courted our evangelical brothers and sisters through multiple denominations, obviously, but courted them as Nixon used the phrase, the silent majority, who did not go along with the progress that our country was making. And just to be expressed, when I say progress, I'm speaking, for example, to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, to the Voting Rights Act of 1965, to the legislative victories, I would call them, and judicial pronouncements that tried to foster equality and tried to foster a sense of community and egalitarianism through law. Nixon spoke to a different demographic he needed a wedge issue to go on with his political campaigning. Where Nixon planted seeds, I would argue that in the 1980 presidential election, I do argue that in the 1980 presidential election, Ronald Reagan capitalized on it in ways that were unforeseen by defeating an evangelical Christian, by defeating a born-again Christian, Jimmy Carter, in a year that was proclaimed the year of the evangelical. But Reagan was so astute with the moral majority and the others in creating wedge issues. Reagan's famous quote, "You can endorse me, but I most certainly endorse you." In the charismatic leadership there forged an alliance that has been together, and overwhelmingly, we look at the statistics of who's voting for who, overwhelmingly together, surrounded by an issue of Roe v. Wade and the hope to overturn Roe v. Wade. And I believe we have hit the bitter end with what we had in the Make America Great Again narrative in the last presidential administration, because things were so incredibly bad and so divisive, and there were so many lines of hatred and bigotry and identity politics that came out. I've got to believe that some of our younger evangelical brothers and sisters have been completely put off by the divisiveness and are moving much more so to the center. So reconciliation for me says that human beings have a chance to move past the politics of division, the politics that have been much a part of the church's narrative, and come together to find common good. And specifically, I lift up the common good along the lines of diversity. Let me just briefly, I don't want to talk too long and give you a long road to a small house, but when I use the term diversity, I use it in a multifaceted way. I speak to cognitive diversity and I speak to identity diversity. And I think both of those are very important now, particularly as the Supreme Court has granted certiorari and is looking at affirmative action in higher education at Harvard and at the University of North Carolina. Cognitive diversity, I believe, is very important because different people think different ways, but when they come together, they're much more apt in a diverse group to solve problems than they would if they were in a homogeneous group. Meaning the lawyer thinks differently than the linguist thinks differently than the accountant. But when you put them together and you're trying to solve common problems or common social issues that the church should be in the business of solving, they can address those in a much more rapid fashion than if it were a homogeneous group alone. When we talk about identity diversity, especially in this day and age, I think it's so important to create a culture of belonging, especially in the church. When you talk about a Black male, a Black straight male, a white straight male, when you talk about a gay woman, when you talk about a Mexican woman, however you self-identify, be it a Lutheran, be it Methodist, be it whatever the self-identification is, it's important that we have identity diversity and create cultures of belonging because we learn so much from each other based on our own individual experiences. So I think that is part of what reconciliation is in the biblical narrative, and that is what God was creating, beginning, I would argue, with the Acts 10:34. I now see God as no respecter of persons, and I think it's incumbent upon us to continue fighting for diversity in this day and age.
Yes, thank you. And to be clear, and you make this point clearly in your book, equality does not equal, nor do we want it to equal same.
Right.
The diversity is an immense gift, and you spend a good bit of time both on a theological level and what I would call kind of a social sciences level about the advantages of diversity, especially in problem solving. I mean, absolutely so. And I want to, again, I appreciate you using the term, you don't want to spoil it, no pun intended with respect to the food analogy, right? But I will lift up initially and just share, I am a proud native of New Orleans. As Sean Payton has announced his retirement tonight as head coach of the New Orleans Saints, I'm still a card-carrying member of the Who Dat Nation, right? I am from New Orleans. And I will say unabashedly, my favorite food on the planet is gumbo. And I love gumbo in particular in this context. Gumbo is much different than the analogy of the melting pot we had in yesteryear. Gumbo is so special to me because it celebrates diversity and it lifts up individuality while it brings things together. When you look at a pot of gumbo, when you look at a bowl of gumbo, you can easily see the chicken, or some people use hen. You can easily see the shrimp. You can easily see the oysters. You can easily see the sausage. Those are very identifiable by themselves. So they maintain their identity, but they come together in a substance to make something that is wonderful, that is rich, and that is uniquely special. So the identity qualities there are not going away. It's not a puree. It's not the melting pot that speaks to an assimilation. And to an extent, we do assimilate to all things, but it doesn't speak to giving up your identity to become something you're not. It speaks to maintaining your identity and complementing others with different identities and being a part of something that's even better, something that's richer because of the diversity. So again, I appreciate you lifting that up, but to your point, yes, diversity is important because we learn from each other. Yeah. You know, early on in the book, and then you keep coming back to it because clearly it's necessary at some point if it's going to be reconciliation, but the whole notion of forgiveness. And I know that that's something that biblically, and Dr. King definitely lifted up forgiveness, Nelson Mandela, and Bishop Tutu.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So it's kind of an obvious thing, but I mean, can you talk a little bit about forgiveness? Because, you know, it's that scary thing. I mean, we're Lutherans, a lot of us here, not all of us maybe, but a lot of us are Lutherans. And, you know, the thing that theologically we can often get criticized about is, you know, the extreme reality of grace. And the real danger that we Lutherans experience is because we lift up grace so much and we get forgiven, and it's nothing we do on our own. So is this forgiveness unconditional, or does it require something to happen first? Or tell me.
It should have reciprocal action. And let me share, you are not the only ones lifting up grace. We Methodists lift up grace like you wouldn't believe too.
Oh, yeah.
And to pay homage to Desmond Tutu in his recent transition, obviously just over 3 weeks ago now. One of the books that he wrote that really touched me, No Future Without Forgiveness. And he lifts up and celebrates the bigness, the magnanimity, if you will, of Nelson Mandela, someone who obviously was incarcerated during apartheid, but after a free and fair election, when he ascends, democratically elected to become that country's ruler, become South Africa's ruler. I shouldn't use the context ruler, to become the president there in South Africa. He invites his former jailer to the inauguration. Not as kind of a pun, not as to say, you know, I'm thumbing my nose at, no, here's a seat of honor. I want you to come up front, right? That is an example, my goodness, of forgiveness. The slate is wiped clean. That's hard work. That's really hard work. The reciprocal side of forgiveness, or the opposite side of the coin with respect to forgiveness, speaks to a duty to change behavior. There's got to be a change in the behavior, right? So it's hard on both sides, and it presupposes that in one aspect there is a dominant class, one who is doing the subjugating, or one who has capacity to do the subjugating, and it speaks to one who has been subjugated on the opposite side of the coin, right? So if in the black-white racial dynamic, just to use that example here in the United States of America, if African Americans are serious about reconciliation and willing to engage in forgiveness, it takes on the opposite side of the coin a reciprocal responsibility on the part of those who have enjoyed majority control for since the inception of the Republic, to engage in a changed behavior, to move forward with a desire for reconciliation, to move forward valuing human contributions other than their own, and to create a table of welcome rather than walls of division. So they're reciprocal obligations. Both are very important, and both are very hard. Neither of those sides is easy, I believe, when you talk about true reconciliation.
Thank you. And I know I'm just firing things away at you, but I'm loving this, and I hope others are gleaning some real food for thought and challenge. So specifically, this is not, in my opinion, I would say a major assertion of the book by any stretch, but it is clearly in there. The word that shall not be named in many contexts, because it just cuts people off, and that word is reparations.
Yeah.
We did not use that word for several reasons. Our synodical efforts to begin to talk about what are reciprocal actions by people who are empowered, which white people in our denomination, as we look at the people in our denomination and the congregations that have and are very marginalized. And the reason we didn't use reparations is because we didn't feel like we had enough to call it reparations. It would be offensive to say we're going to do a little bit. But no matter the amount, no matter anything else, that seems to be a real hot button topic. So what are your thoughts about that one of those reciprocal actions being reparations?
You said that you've read a few books on reconciliation to really delve in and understand the subject matter. I have done the same with respect to reparations to make sure I understand the subject matter. There is a biblical basis for it. And I want to use this example deliberately. There are several examples in the Old Testament, but one that comes to mind in the New Testament. In Luke 19, Zacchaeus climbs up the sycamore tree because Zacchaeus wants to see the Lord. Jesus is coming by. At the end of that exchange, Zacchaeus makes a promise to restore fourfold what he took from others, defrauding others, right? Zacchaeus is not speaking in an individual capacity. Zacchaeus is speaking in a governmental capacity because Zacchaeus did the defrauding as a tax collector. The reason I'm lifting that example up in particular is because if there is a such thing as reparations, if it is going to be made whole, private entities, ecclesial entities, nonprofit organizations do not have either the capacity nor do they have the historical culpability to engage in that. So if there is a reciprocal side where reparations is a direction in which people choose to move, that from my research says it is wholly, squarely within the province of the federal government. And there's some historical examples going back to 1877, the troop withdrawal from the South. We can call a roll on multiple things. We can call the roll on reparations that were made to some of our Japanese American brothers and sisters in the wake of the internment camps there. But it has not been made for African Americans. So I get on in some regards in my community, in my ethnic and my racial community, some people are fed up in talking about reconciliation. They want to go straight ahead to reparations. But when you really delve down, I'm not minimizing the significance of the argument for reparations at all. I'm acknowledging it, but I'm saying if there is a culpability and a capability, a capacity to make the payment, to your point, we don't want to do something that's insulting. I appreciate that. To your point, the culpable and capable party really is the federal government. When James Foreman wrote the Black Manifesto and came at Riverside Church, and I forget the year he did so, but up in New York, on an anniversary of King's assassination, so April 4th, whatever year it was, many moons ago, and made a demand. This is what we quantifiably believe the African American community is entitled to. I understand the logic. I get it 110%. But is well-meaning and is well-intended as many of the people who participated in the benevolent operations and trying to make restoration for some things of the past. I think they only came up with 1/10 of what was due. That really is a shame, and that's something to think about in multiple ways. But I think it goes to support my argument that there's a lack of capacity on non-governmental groups or non-governmental organizations to engage in that. So for our purposes, I do recognize the validity of reparations, but it is wholly separate and apart from the reconciliation paradigm that I'm attempting to push here, and obviously that I'm advocating with respect to the book.
Yeah, and I would say, as someone who's read it, that that's very much the case. So, you can read some comments about reparations there, but that's not what the book is about. The book is about reconciliation, and that's one of the topics that we might talk about, what it could look like on the reciprocal end of the forgiveness part. But that's interesting. And you said the federal government. I know, for instance, the city of Asheville, North Carolina is engaged in some sort of plan for reparations. I know the Episcopal Church has several dioceses, and the ELCA has several synods that are working toward, and it's educational institutions. I think people are slowly beginning to move in that regard, but that's where I find it really fascinating to see your kind of legal and governance expertise along with your theological acumen, and put those together, because I don't have the legal and government side. I think I have a little bit of theological, just osmosis. in that.
when you really think about that, and I so appreciate the examples of those of church organizations, ecclesial bodies, of education organizations, which in many regards there are ministries of churches of larger denominations and what have you. I appreciate their work there. I would quite frankly, and I don't know if we all have the language to distinguish, right? But I would respectfully categorize those efforts as restorative, or attempts to engage in a type of restorative justice, really opposed to reparations. And I'll share with you why. the real repair there and going to reparations, as I appreciate from Bill Darity, Sandy Darity, and Kirsten Mullen in the books back here on the shelf. He's a professor at you have it in your library too. He's a professor over at Duke at the Sanford School, who has done quantified analysis for years and years and looking at reparations. From Here to Equality is the name of the book. They argue that reparations is really something that's proprietary in nature, that really is something that's squarely for the federal government to talk about in terms of its capacity and culpability. But the restoration work or the restorative work that those entities are trying to engage in that you mentioned, I think that's separate from reparations.
Yeah, and it's World War II, and Germany and Israel, and I mean, just there's so many pieces. It's not a new concept by any stretch.
Correct.
It's a global sort of a concept. I guess this is sort of a big one, and it's probably because it makes particularly really privileged people very uncomfortable. I certainly feel like I experience a double standard within this. But anytime I know that I, as a bishop, will say something publicly that has not even partisan, because that's something, at least in our denomination, that we understand that that's not what we're called to be, as partisan, but that political. People will say, if I say something with which they disagree, something that might even be scriptural, as simple as welcome the stranger, welcome one another, therefore, as Christ has welcomed you. I mean, that's just straight scripture, but that's political. And you're not, Bishop, you're not supposed to say that because separation of church and state, the First Amendment, all of that kind of stuff. And first of all, I think a lot of people apparently haven't read the First Amendment.
Preach, Bishop.
Because that's not what it says.
Right.
But the other piece of it is, it seems, and this is just, I think, human nature. But, when we talk about the marriage of, say, evangelicals, and a particular political platform, whether it's based around abortion or whatever it is that it's based around, then that's okay. But if somebody says something on the other side, and both right and left share that we like to tie things, political statements. But what do you think about that whole church and state thing that people come at us about? I'm sure you
Sure. Very, very nuanced, but I will say in the most simplistic terms, the going back to Thomas Jefferson's quote, right, for a separation of church and state, that speaks in our contemporary language in a very partisan perspective to say that we as churches have 501c3 status for a reason, meaning we're not to engage in partisan activity, not supposed to support candidates from a partisan perspective. So I shouldn't go out and tell everybody, vote for Donald Trump. I want you to vote Donald Trump, vote straight the red ticket. I can't do that, but I certainly have a responsibility, I believe, to advocate for issues and to address issues, because the issues that affect the community are issues that will inherently affect the church. Let me say something about my read on theological leadership. As I think and as I have studied about ministry, about ministerial leadership, I have studied, as most of us have, the Monis triplex office, the threefold office, if you will, doctrine, a threefold office, the prophet, the priest, the king. Jesus was the exemplar who led perfectly in all three. When you think about the work of the priest, you think about conciliatory leadership, the person who represents the institution and goodwill to people in need. When you think about the kingly leadership, or in non-gender specific terms, the royal leadership, the royal domain, it's somebody who organizes, somebody who pushes an agenda forward, somebody who says, hey, come, we're moving in this way. But when you think about prophetic leadership, you think about speaking truth to institutions of power. And the Jesus that I read about in those 4 gospel narratives was a prophetic leader, because he was someone who continually and consistently spoke truth to institutions of power. In Jesus's inaugural sermon, or the announcement of his ministry, however you want to phrase it, in Luke 4, when Jesus says, "I've come to give sight to the blind, I've come to set the captives free," he's speaking about a social justice movement as an ethnically oppressed Jew, someone who is oppressed by governmental system, and he comes to take on that system. So again, when you think about the cross of Christ, the figure that King addressed frequently in his writings and in public speaking, that vertical axis represents the piety. There's a great division, piety or politics, some would call it. That vertical axis represents the piety, because we are in relationship with the Lord. But this horizontal axis speaks to our role in society. And if we are going to be Christians, which means being Christ-like, to imitate the ministry of Jesus means you can't just stop at the king or at the royal and the priest. You have to include the prophetic side of Jesus's leadership too, because we all are God's children, and part of Jesus's reign was to address institutions of power as they marginalize those who needed a voice. So I don't, again, to speak to the proverbial separation of church and state, I nod towards Thomas Jefferson. I'm actually doing some things now, a lecture forthcoming with the Baptist Joint Committee for separation of church and state, on religious freedom rather. Well, we will get into weeds and talk about some of the nuances of religious liberty and the like, and what have we done in violation of the First Amendment, not just in terms of establishing a church state, but how we have prohibited the free exercise of religion. We'll get into weeds on that stuff, but just politically, it is impossible, I believe, as a Christian to not be political, but we should not misuse our resources and be partisan. And I hope that distinction comes across with the sincerity with which I'm trying to share it.
Yeah, for sure. That's helpful. And that's exactly the same distinction we try to make, that the convictions that we hold don't come from a political party or platform. They might resonate with one, but they don't come from that. Our convictions come from the gospel of Jesus and from the prophets and from the whole scriptural witness. And so the political involvement that we have comes from our Christian or Jewish or whatever our faith conviction is. And, you know, if you can connect the dots and say, well, that sounds a lot like this. Well, it sort of does, you know.
Sure.
Yeah, well, that's very, very helpful.
And thank you. I want to go back for just a moment, for example, because in the book I lift up some examples of immigrants who were met at the border and obviously taken, in the case of many infants, taken from their families, incarcerated, family separation and the like. When we think about Jesus, when we think about Jesus fleeing in the narratives, the infancy narratives, particularly Matthew telling the story of his flight because of persecution, there's no way you can call Jesus anything but an immigrant going into a foreign land, right? Who was fleeing persecution. So it's very difficult for me as a Christian to look at others who choose to draw those lines, and arbitrary lines, I believe, right? You want to have a docile Jesus. You want to have Jesus who's as meek as a lamb, but you don't want to have the Jesus who turned over the tables in the temple. Aubrey Hendricks rather is a scholar who's written a few books. In one of his books, the title is called The Politics of Jesus. He asked the question, who domesticated my Lord, right? So again, I think there is an inherent role we have as prophetic leaders to be political, but not to cross the line and become partisan. I just want to emphasize that.
Yeah. And, you know, before Dr. Power was at Duke Chapel, I believe Sam Wells was there right before him. He has a wonderful and really simple definition of politics. He says, politics is the word used to describe our attempts to reconcile our differences short of violence. So speaking of reconciliation,
Yes.
Politics play, if not an essential role, a pretty important role. I think they might play an essential role in reconciliation in a larger culture.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed.
So I think that we can't be apolitical. We just, well, we've talked about that. I need to hush because I'm just having fun, and but there are several questions, and Pastor Danielle is going to lift up some of the questions for you from folks in the group because I'm talking way too much.
That is
Thank you so
okay.
much.
People are enjoying this immensely, and we appreciate this. And a reminder that Pastor Jay will be back with us on our final session when we've read the book and we have read about gumbo. And Pastor Jay, just as a brief piece, because some of these questions connect to it, you mentioned at the very beginning the 3 types of reconciliation. Will you say the 3 again and give like the 1-sentence definition so that it's in people's head as we enter into these questions?
Sure, absolutely. I want to invoke the image of the Christian cross with the vertical axis and a horizontal axis. And this is something that's lifted in the book and something that Martin King did quite often in oratory as well as in writing. If you think about salvific reconciliation, human beings are saved, according to Christian theology. We are saved and reconciled in our relationship with God through Jesus. So through Jesus's sacrificial suffering, his unmerited suffering, we are reconciled in our relationship with God through Jesus. When one thinks about equality, particularly Paul's theology of equality through his epistles, we are social reconciliation. We are reconciled to one another because of Jesus, right? We are equals because of Jesus, because he died for all of us, not for a select group of us, but he suffered and died for all of us. And then if you really think about the egalitarian follow through on what that means, if you really embrace a theology of equality embedded in social reconciliation, a close sibling has got to be civil reconciliation. When we act in the prophetic domain, speaking truth to institutions of power, and the greatest example of civil reconciliation, I would say, were the ministers, particularly Dr. King, who was the public face of the civil rights movement, but the ministers who spoke truth to power because they wanted equality in government and in governance. The Bible is replete with examples of those who spoke truth to power. When you think about civil disobedience, don't think about it in a pejorative context. Think about it in the Old Testament sense of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right? Who refused to bow down to the dictates of a king, of a governmental authority that they did not agree with. So they took a moral position to do otherwise. And when government distinguishes and discriminates against individuals, be it based on gender, ethnicity, race, what have you, somebody's got to speak truth to power and attempt to bring us to a place of equality. That is civil reconciliation. Now, that's more than the sentence you allotted me, so I apologize. But
That's okay.
Question, though.
That's okay. We're going to hear that. And I appreciate you just sort of centering that. One of the questions centers around this question, Jay, like, can we educate our way into this? Is it a developmental growth? Is it the transformation of the spirit? What leads us from being sort of egocentric to maybe ethnocentric in the sense of like, I'm good with my people, to say like, no, we're caught up in the cosmos together. Like, I mean, yeah, that's the question.
So when you really think about Christ's ministry, Jesus's ministry, it was not so much about the individuality, about piety rather than individual context, but it was about social good in the communal context and about uniting people and uniting systems in the name of equality. There again is and I unpack this in parts of the book. I will give a nod to the U.S. Senator from Georgia, Raphael Warnock, writes about the Black church, but the paradigm is applicable to the church universal. His book is called The Divided Mind of the Black Church, and there's been years, generations of debate regarding piety and politics, right? Piety meaning we're here because Jesus died, but we're equal to one another because Jesus also lived, right? In the ministry that Jesus lived as a prophetic witness and speaking truth to institutions of power was about bringing about an egalitarian existence for all of us. So, so I think that is really part of the ministry. When you look at Paul's writing, 2 Corinthians chapter 5, 17, 18, 19, that is the ministry Jesus left to the church for us to live it out with one another. Have we gotten it right? Probably not. Have we gotten better? Probably so. The book has, it lays out facts, but it also, I think, ends with a tone of optimism of saying, in spite of all of the stuff we've seen, I still believe America's brighter days are ahead. And I believe the church can be an exemplar through its reconciliation theology and promoting a culture of diversity and inclusion. It can be an exemplar for the secular world. And I believe we can learn a lot from some secular world best practices and incorporate those things into the church.
Thank you for that, Jay. Another question as you talk about this is about, you know, we've talked about, okay, here's the call. How do we grow in this, in the salvific reconciliation? One of the questions is, how is reconciliation possible between people, especially when harm has been there? And does forgiveness always have to happen for there to be reconciliation? I mean, I know, Tim, Bishop Smith, you asked that kind of question. You know, those pieces to it, and sort of tied to that, there's a question about in South Africa and the use of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the talking about that. Do you think that's the kind of thing to get both relationships restored, but also maybe civil reconciliation in even social reconciliation that we would need to be implementing?
Yeah, so I think it's important for us meaning people, to approach one another, whether it be through rather group dynamics or in individual relationships, with a willingness to perhaps disagree, but a commitment to never be disagreeable, right? So we may disagree about some things, but there's no reason ever to have acrimony or animosity about someone because they have a difference of opinion. The bottom line, for me at least, from a theological perspective, is we all are equal. The bottom line, if you look at what the law says in a secular context, we all are supposed to be equal, but we both, as the church, as an institution, as an ecclesial institution, and both when we look at society at large, or reciprocally when we look at society at large, we have not always gotten that correct. So I think there has got to be a willingness to look at those who have oppressed or those who have harmed, and engage in the ministry of forgiveness, because the best example I can hold out as a Christian for forgiveness is the forgiveness Jesus gave. Every Good Friday, I am reminded of Jesus's 7 last sayings, and among them, forgive them, for they know not what they do. At the most difficult time, my goodness, did he say forgive them? He said forgive them at the most difficult time. So forgiveness is hard work. And the opposite side of the coin is that the change behavior that is necessary to meet forgiveness, right? The change in behavior is hard work too. People who have been in a dominant space don't want to lose that dominance, right? I preached a sermon last week to honor Dr. King, and from Exodus, I think chapter 14, verses 5 through 8. Pharaoh asked the question rhetorically, what have we done letting Israel leave our service, right? People say, we want our country back. You know, it's been too much. We want our country back because they don't want to give up what they had. So I acknowledge that both of those sides of the coin are very difficult, but the work of reconciliation is not for the faint at heart.
For those of you that also posted questions in the chat, we've captured those, and the remaining ones in the Q&A we will save for when we're back with Pastor Jay in a couple of weeks. And I think one of them in particular, when we talk about equity and diversity and how do we hold those words together, and there's a lot of fear. Okay, if we're diverse, then what do we give up? Things that you just said about wanting to go back. So we'll capture those, and I promise for those of you that put them in the Q&A, we'll talk about them in book study time and also with Pastor Jay. We're coming to the end of our time. Bishop Smith, you got a remaining thought or question, and then I'm going to give Pastor Jay the floor to share anything that's still kind of rumbling with you tonight.
I would simply say that, you know, with the whole forgiveness piece, I think forgiving someone doesn't mean that there are no consequences. You know, if somebody abuses my grandchildren, if I called on them to babysit for my grandchildren, I do believe God requires that I do my very best eventually somehow to forgive that person. But what I'm not going to do is invite them to babysit for my grandchildren again. So, I mean, I think you can forgive a prisoner who's incarcerated, but they're still incarcerated. I mean, there are consequences because we're in that already not yet world. So reconciliation doesn't make everything perfect short of the fullness of the reign of God, as far as I'm concerned. But we try to, in the meantime, echo that. But Pastor Augustine, what do you want to share as we kind of wind up here?
As we close, I want to say thank you for a rich and robust discussion. Pastor Danielle, you lifted up something that is so very salient. There is so much fear. There is so much that has been done to weaponize certain terms, and there is an undercurrent of fear. If we engage in reconciliation, what do we give up? What's got to change? I want to leave you again in hope, since the book is released on February 8th, in hopes by the next time we get together, everybody has the book. And it begins with the gumbo. The shrimp is not giving up anything to be in community with the chicken. The chicken is not giving up anything to be in community with the okra. The okra is not giving up anything to be in community with the sausage. Just the opposite. They come together, maintaining their individuality, but creating something that is incredibly special and something that's incredibly beautiful. When I cook, I call it gumbo. But when I think about Jesus Christ, we call it the church. That's how people are supposed to come together in community, not giving up who they are. That's how they're supposed to come together in society, not giving up who they are, but complementing one another for something that's absolutely beautiful. That's the ministry of reconciliation Jesus left to the church.
Wow. On a lighter note, physically, actually really physically, both at the beginning and at the end, you made my mouth water.
That's so good. In fact, someone in the chat said, did you include a recipe in this book? So we can think about that. Pastor Jay, if people want to follow you and follow the work that you're doing, St. Joseph's, just tell us where we can find you.
Sure. The best way to catch me, my website is jayaugustine.com, JAYAUGUSTINE.com. All of the social media handles are there. On Twitter, I'm jaugustine9. Instagram, jaugustine9, all of the good stuff. But jayaugustine.com is my website.
Great. Thank you again so much for being with us. Carissa has put in the chat, both on Facebook and in Zoom, we'll put the link to order the book. We want to encourage you to go ahead and do that, get it. Our first book study will be about a week after you get your book. So get ready and get reading in that first conversation that we will have. And the way that we'll gather together is that we'll invite about 6 of you to join the screen with Bishop Smith and really unpack those chapters and how we're going to have conversation. So that'll be coming out this week and if you're particularly interested, you can reach out to me or Carissa and say, oh yeah, I want to have that. Not that I'm setting Bishop Smith up, but I want to have that conversation and I want to delve deeply into that. And again, Pastor Jay will be back with us in our final session. Pastor Jay, I wonder if as a way to close us out tonight, Bishop Smith opened us in prayer. Would you close us in prayer this evening?
It would be my absolute honor. Thank you so much. Let's take a moment to go before the Lord. Precious and wonderful God, we thank you for this time of exploration. We thank you for this time of sharing. We thank you, dear God, for this time of community. We pray that you will enrich our hearts, enrich our families, enrich our church communities, enrich, dear God, our ministries, so that we may all be drawn to diversity, we may all be drawn to inclusion, and we all may be drawn closer to you. Be with us as we leave this virtual space, but never, dear God, from your holy presence. These and all of the blessings we ask in the name of your darling son, Jesus. Amen.